Good evening, and welcome to this evening's session of the Hearts of Men podcast, hosted by the Empowering Perspective community. Now, let's dive into this conversation. Listen, man, I'm gonna tell y'all right now. I think this conversation is gonna be lit. So, for all of you in the chat, Michelle Ray, Miss Verlene McCoy, aka Queen V, always good to see you. Crystal Everett, MJ, Lisa Keys. I think I got everybody. So, for everybody in the chat, this is the opportunity to ask all your questions because they are primed and ready for it. Because this evening we are talking about navigating difficult conversations. So, what is the problem with difficult conversations? Well, first and foremost, they're difficult. That's the biggest problem. I will also say, in conjunction with them, this is where problems tend to exacerbate themselves within the relationship or within the span of relationship. When I say relationship, we're not just talking about male, female, or intimate relationships. We're talking about any type of relationship that exists out there. So, that being said, you have people who have struggled with communicating, struggle with articulating their perspective, have a difficult time saying exactly what it is they're thinking. Their emotions get heightened, and what they're thinking and what they're saying is not adding up. So the problem is numerous when it comes down to it. And so I'm just going to tell you right now, this is probably going to be a multi-week conversation. So just make sure that you're here with us as we go through it. So first and foremost, I want to drop it in the lap of these brothers because we're going to get the ball rolling. In your opinion, what is the most challenging part of difficult conversations?
Ego.
Say more, sir.
Ego and control. The issue is having a difficult conversation means you have to be able to sit across from someone who actually wants to have the conversation. And you
Mm,
cannot control whether or not they want to have the conversation. So your ego gets involved saying, you need to talk to me. You better talk to me. You should talk to me. You try to control whether or not that person wants to talk to you. Instead of just saying, hey, we need to talk. You know how to reach me. And then going on about your business.
mm.
Another side of, and the ego side of it is the other person being a participant in that conversation, taking everything you say as a personal attack on them instead of a specific, instead of a, I'm not a specific attack on the behavior, and I'm using attack for lack of a better term. Because most of the time when we are having conversations, we are not trying to make that other person seem like they are the worst person in the world. We are just simply saying, hey, this is difficult and we need to fix this. Because if we do not fix this, we cannot be in a relationship, whether it's family, whether it's boyfriend and girlfriend, whether it's job. If things need to be discussed, they need to be discussed.
I would say for me, it's the anticipation of an expected reaction or response to what I really want to say. And so what tends to happen is I begin dancing in circles trying to word my feelings or my opinion or my statement, whatever it is, in a manner that you would receive it and not attack it. And so it becomes hard to have a conversation because as I'm trying to speak, I'm having the conversation in my head the way I believe it's going to go once I say what I really feel. And if you and I feel sometimes that if you actually understand what I'm trying to say or what I really want to say by the way I'm dancing it, that you still react that way. So sometimes it's just easier to do this. Whatever. And lean back and just separate yourself out of the conversation and nothing becomes accomplished.
I would say from experience, fear. And I gotta let it breathe like Chris did. Chris let it breathe. Now, I would say fear because I've been on the back end of those difficult conversations that needed to be had. And whenever I would know that they were coming, that anxiety would build up and it would cause me to take flight. So you say, hey, we need to talk. And I'm like, God, dog, another kid. That's boom. I'm thinking that I automatically thought the worst, like, God, dog, we need to talk. We need to talk mean something's been observed, something's been found out, or what did I do now? Or I always went to the left with it, like, man, what the heck I do now? I ain't burned down the house, and I'm good on this end. So it was always that fear that would make me run from the conversation. Where it's like, okay, if I stay out long enough, she should be tired, or whatever. Or if it's one of those situations, or if it was at work, it's like, dang, who did this? What happened? So now you calling around trying to see what the heck happened, so that you can be prepared for the conversation. Because when you don't know what the difficulty is, walking into it, you'd rather be prepared for it versus you get blindsided by something.
So, want to make sure I'm getting everything straight here. Chris, you said ego. Tawami, you said it's, and I want to make sure I'm articulating it correctly. You said that you have the conversation, not necessarily you, but having the conversation in your head, in the midst of having a conversation with the other person. And when I hear you say that, the thing that comes to my mind is that my knowledge of this person makes me do some type of wargaming when it comes down to the communication that I'm going to have with this other person, simply because of the knowledge that I have of that person. Because they have shown behavior in the past that say that if I bring this difficult thing to them, I am going to meet some type of resistance. Did I get that right? Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. And Roland, go ahead, Chris. I'm sorry.
I was going to add one more thing,
Sure.
and Tawame kind of hit it, but I kind of want to just put it out there. I would say one of the most challenging parts of a difficult conversation is objectivity. When having a difficult conversation, you must remove yourself from the conversation. You cannot control how that other person is going to react. That movie that you have playing in your head that only stars you never really hits the reel.
That you said something too that I left out for the sake of not rambling on, but whatever that is you playing in your head, because I've done it and I still do it sometimes because I don't like conflict, so you have to realize it's never going to play out the way you think it's playing out. It's never as bad as you build it up to be. I can say 100% of the times I've played it up in my head and I was ready for conflict. I had to build myself up because I played this argument in my head 100 times. And now I'm built up to go in there like, and it never got the response that I thought it was going to get. And so I had to check myself and re-engage how I went into the conversation.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. And so to make sure I'm touching on Roland's point, Roland, you brought fear to the conversation. And in some cases, it may be because of something that may have happened previously. But it's also there are these key triggers, these words, and we talked about them before. Hey, we need to talk. Right, that's a fear conversation. That is something that people will generally move away from. Well, how about right now? Well, no, we ain't gonna talk about it right now. I got something I got to do, but we'll talk later. Well, if we can't talk about it right now, we ain't gonna talk at all. That's just what it is. So when it comes down to it, you have those particular conversations that actually exist of ego. You have the wargaming that takes place, and then you have fear. I like the fact that you brought all of that to the table. The thing that I want to interject into this is misaligned visions when it comes down to having difficult conversations. Because one person, and again, this could be a matter of communication, lack of communication, or changing of the vision as well. Because what I honestly believe that if you have aligned visions, and if you have that, like Chris, you just said, having the ability to be objective, when you have that objectivity that's playing a part of the conversation, so you can clearly see the facts of what actually happened, and this person is talking about one thing and this person is talking about something totally different, but this person is talking about the relationship, but this person is talking about what they want, conversation becomes difficult. That's what I call misaligned visions. There's no two visions in a relationship. Two, the one of another word for saying two is die. So when you di, not dye, right? or DIE, just DI, right? So die literally means two. So if you got two visions, it won't be long before you discover division, because that's exactly what actually happens. So if we're not focusing on what the original agreement is, then the problem is going to be that we're talking about two totally different things, and therefore conflict arises because we're not working towards the same goal. So, man, I greatly appreciate you guys bringing that to the table, and I'm seeing in the chats that they're getting it cranked up already, and I love it. So, thank you for your responses, everybody. I want to kind of bring some of those to the table here so that we can take a look at them. Let's start off with who was the first person? I think MJ. No, I'm sorry. Go all the way back up. Michelle had the first statement. Welcome, Bernadette Simmons. Good to see you as well. So Michelle said the most difficult part of a conversation is releasing control and active listening. So I'm really glad to hear the control thing is brought into the conversation, because I think we talked about this on Wednesday night. Um, so I'm sorry. In the continuation, she said, and being receptive to the other person's perspective and awareness of a behavior or situation. So absolutely. I'm really glad to hear that she brought control to the conversation, because we talked about that previously. You don't control people, but you got to be careful, because it's not just controlling people. You have what you would call active and passive, but then you also have the illusion. When it comes down to it, you don't have any power over anybody. That's why we talked about power for what, 3 weeks. You don't have any power over any person that you're in relationship with. That's just what the truth. So when it comes down to control, there is no control. There's just the illusion of control. So when you look at a situation to where a conversation is happening and a person wants to do a thing, and this person say, well, that thing does not add value to the relationship, but this person still wants to do it. Well, a lot of times you're here where you're being controlling. That's not control. That's the illusion of control, because you want them to agree with the thing that you want to do. So I'm glad you brought that to the table. Um, Let me see. Active listening. Absolutely. I love that. So Queen V says, I say getting the conversation started in the first place. Absolutely. Some people fear getting into the conversation because they fear some type of backlash, some type of repercussion. And we're going to talk about a lot of those things here coming up. Next, MJ said, I would say the biggest challenge is closing the gap between intent and impact. Oh my God. I'm glad she said that, because a lot of times you will hear a thing come to the table, and I think I mentioned it earlier that what they're thinking and what they're saying is not necessarily the same thing. But once it comes out, you can't pull it back in and start over. What it said is said. And a lot of times you have people on the other end say, no, you meant what you said. Like, you can't don't change it now. You meant what you said. That's what you'll hear. Well, I didn't mean it like that. My intent wasn't. But a lot of times what you'll hear is that once it happens, person don't really care what your intent was. It's the impact that actually hits.
Intentions are immaterial.
There it is. Our intentions sometimes don't land on the intended target. Absolutely. Let me see. I'm sorry. Conversations become difficult with when one or both parties' resolutions are not aligned in stubbornness. Yes, agreed 100%. I mentioned the alignment previously, but I'm also glad she mentioned stubbornness, because your ability to stay on your point simply because you're not focused on what's right and you just want to focus on who's right, that becomes a larger issue than the original issue itself. So thank you for saying that as well. Queen V said, if both parties want control, the conversation is not going to go well, especially if they are both trying to have control. No one should have any control over the other person. Absolutely. And thank you for sharing that. Cassandra McKenzie, welcome to the conversation. I don't know who Facebook user is. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that that might be Miss Onita. Later tends to never come when someone says we can talk. Like, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So then they're stewing in their thoughts, trying to figure out what that conversation is going to be about. Let's see. I think Michelle has another one. Another difficulty is when a person is speaking facts and the other person is speaking in it. Yep, absolutely. Cannot stress that enough. Deflection is a huge challenge when communicated. Absolutely, Miss Pamela. Definitely. Sometimes we got to stay in it, and we need to pay close attention to what the person is saying and respond. Well, not sometimes, all the times, and respond exactly to what they're saying. So, with that being said, now we're going to uncover some of the points that kind of highlight the things that you guys said. And we're going to start off first with what is known as emotional discomfort. Now, one of the primary reasons difficult conversations are challenging is because they often involve a high degree of emotional discomfort. People generally avoid situations that make them uncomfortable. In a difficult conversation, this could involve confronting someone about their behavior, admitting your own mistakes, or discussing a sensitive topic. That being said, gentlemen, next question is, why do you think emotional discomfort persists during difficult conversations, and what underlying factors might contribute to its continuation?
I think sometimes people just don't want to rock the boat, or they have a past history of something where I said once I said this, you reacted like that. And so now I know if I come at you this way, it's like you got to pussyfoot around it, or you got to tiptoe around it instead of being direct. Or whenever you have a conversation, you're already trying to see how it's going to go before you even get into it. Because especially if you know the person, because you're not having difficult conversation with somebody you don't know. So if you just like some people are direct and don't care how they say it, don't care how you feel about it. They just gonna get it out. How you take it is how you take it, and they aren't necessarily concerned about the how you respond. It's like, okay, so it's almost a combative state, whereas some people don't want to be in that combative state. So if you come at them with the rah rah, like I'm trying to keep it calm, I'm trying to keep it peaceful, and you coming at me and you almost making me want to let my hands go. And it's like, I'm trying to be peaceful. I'm like Big Red. My office hours are from 9 to 5. Man, he said it like 3 times until he got to that point. Like, dude, you done pushed my buttons, and now I got to react. I'm like Big Red. I want to keep it here. I don't want to go there. But if you keep coming at me, you're gonna get what you asked for.
First of all, I am not that bad. I am going to preface this by saying that there is this phrase that I hear all the time, everywhere, and it is called emotional intelligence. I am a lowest common denominator kind of dude. I feel that emotional intelligence is being intelligent with your emotions. I am extremely articulate when it comes to how I feel, especially if we are having a difficult conversation, because I do not want any misunderstandings. If you have never come across someone who is intelligent enough with their emotions to be able to convey a point, then that can be discomforting in itself, because they do not know how to deal with that. And they cannot use emotional triggers to knock you off of your square. And as well, and when it comes to the male to male dynamic, emotional discomfort can lead to a fight. We hear it all the time. There's always a low level threat of violence when we are dealing with each other. That is why when we talk to each other like this. You will rarely see two men raising their voices in public when they are having a difficult conversation, because they know that there is a slight chance that somebody might have to run a fade. It is what it is. And I would say another thing that can trigger emotional discomfort is the person that you're talking to not being used to being held accountable for their actions. When you have someone sitting across from you that has always been babied, or that has always been protected, when somebody says something about them or checks their behavior, that's when the fight or flight comes into play. That is difficult in itself. I have dealt with that a good portion of my life.
So I'm curious at this point because you said a lot there, and I want to make sure that as people are hearing this, I want to make sure that we continue to dissect it. So you ended off with the fight or flight, but this is a person that you're in relationship with. So why does there need to be fight or flight in the midst of it? How does that come about in the midst of a conversation, even if it's just a conversation?
If we're talking about the male on male dynamic, sometimes the fight resolves the conversation. We fight, we get it over with, we shake hands, and then we move on. If we cannot come to a resolution, sometimes emotions and tensions get that high. Or you see that there is a fight about to take place, and you say, even though this is really irking my nerves, fighting will not resolve anything, and we will both end up in a bad place. So I am going to walk away. That's the flight part of it.
And I don't want you to think I'm just jumping on you. I want, it's a panel question.
No, I get it.
Yeah,
I understand that sometimes what I say needs further explanation.
So I'm sorry.
Like for me, the fight or flight response would come up because I knew I was wrong, because I was doing some stuff I shouldn't have been doing. And when that difficult conversation come up, I'm going to get loud and boisterous so I can leave. Or I'm going to shut you down and deflect to another situation altogether where we're not talking about that. I'm pointing blame at other stuff, and I'm trying to do everything besides focus on what you're trying to talk about.
Now, the next piece I kind of want to jump on, because you brought up emotional intelligence, and I'm so glad you did. In the space to where every other video or every other conversation that you're hearing today is talking about emotional intelligence, and most people don't put forth the necessary time, energy, and efforts to study what emotional intelligence is all about, let alone learn how to apply it. But they would say things like, I express myself well, right? What is the difference? And this isn't just for Chris, by the way. What is the difference between understanding emotional intelligence conceptually and applying emotional intelligence?
I think sometimes we can be so egotistical where we think, okay, since I am emotionally intelligent, that the other person is unintelligent. And we can put ourselves on the pedestal. And so in the conversation, we can become demeaning. We can become, we can start to gaslight. We can start to do certain things because we're trying to use our intelligence to belittle the other person to where they back down.
So that's not emotional intelligence. That's just intelligence.
Yeah.
Okay.
I laughed when I saw the comment come across from Facebook say control, because so let me be honest, right? I hate the term emotional intelligence. I hate a lot of terms that we use today because they were created to weaponize words, right? Like you hear all these phobias. Like last time when I grew up and I took the SAT, I was taught anything that ends with phobia means fear of. But today it means I don't like what you do. And so I weaponize your disagreements with me. And emotional intelligence, I weaponize emotion by using these trigger words. And so like Roland said, it's just intelligence. It's not necessarily emotional. Now, if we talk about the application of true emotional intelligence, it goes back to that concept of what Chris said, right? When two now I must rephrase a little bit because I got to talk about some of the younger generation, because not all men are wired the same. If I'm having a difficult conversation with either one of you or Uncle Junior, I have a respect for y'all because I know that you don't operate in disrespect. So nothing you said or say will come across to harm me. So I will not be in defense with anything you bring to me. I would have to be self-aware enough to know that you're not going to say something to me crazy if I'm really not doing nothing. So when I come to you and I have a conversation, I can keep it down here, like Chris said, with that low volume and that one-on-one speech, because I know it's not going past that level. But there's certain people that I know that are, when I talk to, I have to keep in mind that as men, like Chris said, as men, if I go to this level, I'm expecting you to want to run the fade, right? But men nowadays are not wired to expect that same level of response. So they don't think this might have to turn physical. I could just disrespect you. I mean, this conversation can keep going, man. And I'm trying not to rant because we can't weaponize the English language to make people either agree with you or shut up. Then go live in a bubble.
I think when it's knowing how to handle you, because you can't handle somebody else. You got to know how to handle yourself. That's like when I'm talking with someone. I was talking with a young guy the other day, and as we're talking, it's getting a little heated, which is cool because that's how men talk. But then he commenced to call me, and I say, okay, I'm not. We can talk, we can get loud, we can do all this other stuff, but you ain't gonna call me that because I'm trying to get to the point to where I'm letting them know this is unacceptable during this conversation. And me being, which I'm thinking I'm cool, I'm like, dude, we can talk about whatever, but we not going to, because now you're disrespecting me. And when that comes in, it goes somewhere else. And I'm trying to keep my emotions at a certain level. I'm not trying to go high, not trying to go low. I'm trying to be even keel and that's what emotionally intelligent people do. They control their emotion to the point to where they don't get heated. They don't get it's not an ebb and flow like I'm matching you. Like certain people match energy. Okay, you going there, I'm going there. No, I'm good enough to where I can keep it here, but I'm gonna help you understand this is how you talk to.
I will just let you make a fool of yourself. I will talk exactly like this. I will not raise my voice. I will not get heated. I will simply state my point and let you talk. If you decide that you want to get all heated, that lets me know more about you than it does me.
So when I tell people I don't, and if this is not what you're talking about, when I tell people I don't like conflict, it's because my father taught me something that a lot of people I say it to now misunderstand. My father said, grown men don't argue. We're not going to argue and raise voices. If it gets to that level, either fight me or shut up. Right? And a lot of people don't understand that concept because they think I'm trying to be physical or I'm trying to be violent. No, what I'm saying is let's have a respectful conversation. Let's speak articulate and clear and say what's on our heart. And like Roland and like Chris said, just don't disrespect me in the meantime. So I'm not going to pacify nobody's emotions, but I'm not going to go out my way to disrespect you because you hurt my feelings. If that makes sense.
That is the thing that is missing. Most of the time when men want to have conversations like this, it is not for beef. It is for clarification. We are trying to figure something out. If we cannot address each other and say, hey, what's going on? What is happening right now? Let me know, because this right here, what you are doing, I'm not feeling. So I need to figure this out. And if we cannot figure this out, then there's no reason for us to even continue conversing. We may as well part ways now because it is not going to end well.
So I'm definitely in agreement with everything that you guys are saying. And Roland, I like the fact that you injected what application of emotional intelligence truly is. It's really emotional regulation, right? In fact, I regulate myself to such a degree that I know that at a certain point there is a cutoff. That cutoff goes back to what Chris was saying, that fight or flight. I ain't fixing to fight nobody at the ripe young age of almost 50, just not almost old as Roland. But that being said, I know that there's a certain point that there's a cutoff. That cutoff means I walk away from the conversation. That cutoff means I walk away from you because maybe this is the norm for you when these types of conversations happen. So that's what emotional regulation is. It's not a bad thing. I want to make sure I'm saying that. I think too many times what ends up happening is that we get confused. Yeah, we get confused. And what do I mean when I say that? We get confused because people try to force you to stick with a thing, but they try to force you to stick with a thing that's not healthy. And if the thing itself is unhealthy, why stick with something that's unhealthy? I think that's an important thing to consider. So when you look at these conversations, when you look at the emotional discomfort, and Chris, I like the fact that you brought to the table that maybe at certain points in time or earlier in your life, no one ever held you accountable. Trust me, I've experienced that far too many times in my life. I am a bottom line type person, very objective. We'll have a conversation. All I'm going to talk about are the facts. That's it. That's all I got in the conversation. It is simple. You go to court. There's only two things you're going to talk about. In fact, there is a saying when it comes down to from lawyers. If you have the law, you argue the law. If you have the facts, you argue the facts. If you have neither, you pound the table and scream like hell. So the people who are hyper emotional in the midst of that conversation, they have neither and they know it. So the only thing they want to talk about is their emotional discomfort. Well, where does the discomfort come from? It comes from the simple fact that somebody is projecting the facts as they see it, their perspective of the facts. It is a fact according to them. I didn't say it was a truth. I always say there's three different things. You have feelings, you have facts, and you have truth. The truth is it. The truth is invertible. You can turn the truth around all you want to. It still looks the same. Facts looks like whatever the person's perception of reality look like. It doesn't make it wrong, but what I would tell you is it does not have complete awareness in it. Therefore, from another person's perspective, those facts look different. But feelings are false across the board because it is laced by feelings. It is laced by perspective. I'm sorry. It is laced by the interpretation of fact projected onto a person. Has nothing to do with the facts itself. It's how I feel about the facts. And what I'm telling you is my feelings, not the facts. And so when those things hit the table, especially the discomfort part, then that becomes a problem. It becomes problematic. I'm not saying that anybody's feelings are wrong, but when you start projecting your feelings, that's wrong. And that's what makes conversations most difficult.
The
So
same
man,
thing that I was thinking when it comes to people not having that self-awareness or that ability to accept accountability. So it creates emotional discomfort when here's what it creates emotional discomfort for the person that is actually speaking about what's going on when you can't receive it or accept accountability in it because I'm sharing with you what's on my heart and you're deflecting as I'm speaking and I can read it in your body language or in your well that's the way you see it. Don't say that. When people say that, don't say that. Let's just after that let's just fight. Because you just say that I'm my my thoughts, my words, and my feelings are irrelevant to you, and we have nothing else to talk about. We ain't even got to talk tomorrow. You was blocked as you said it. Actually, right? That's how I feel when people say stuff like that. So, but that's the only thing that I would actually add in. But Chris hit pretty much everything, and even your questions just hit everything I was going to say on this point anyway.
And I think sometimes we have that discomfort because I don't want to be wrong. I don't want to admit I'm wrong. I don't want to have like if we're in a conversation and we come to the point to where we doing this and somebody has to be wrong. It's hard for certain people, and then they're blaming on I'm an alpha, I'm a Taurus, I'm a Leo, all this other mess. Instead of saying,
Do not get me started on them
I'm
stupid
just a
ass
hard
zodiac
headed.
signs.
Hey, some people are just hard headed and won't admit they're wrong and just can't move on and say, yeah, you're right. I'm wrong. I apologize. And let's move on. Instead of doing that, they rather say, well, I'm right too. And like you said, the lawyers say, hey, when you ain't right or wrong and got the law behind you, beat the table and be the loudest. Instead of being the loudest, say, man, dang, I am wrong. And just move forward. It'll be more beneficial to the relationship.
yeah, I agree. And I add one, excuse me, I add one more piece to that as well. I think, because I think, Gaddy, you mentioned it when you talked about emotional intelligence and you mentioned self awareness. Well, self awareness is the first stage of becoming emotionally intelligent. Um, they lack the self awareness because they don't realize that they're going through what is called an amygdala overload. which simply means that their emotions are getting the best of them. When your emotions get the best of them, your ability to think goes down, and that is a known scientific fact. So when a person's emotions are up here, it may be better for them just to say, take a time out, right? Take a time out, go for a walk, walk around the block, do whatever, and then come back to that conversation. Let it be an agreed upon thing. So that at this particular point in time, you can finish the conversation rationally. But instead of that, they want to stay there and hang in the conversation and go toe to toe, pound for pound. And again, they're talking feelings, the other person's talking facts. And so it is really just a wasted conversation at that point in time. And then some people just if somebody just have to pull the plug, somebody has to pull the plug on that conversation.
See, when we were in the military, when I used to have soldiers, some soldiers come in loud and ignorant and all that other stuff, and I used to sit there and look at them and be like, hey, and I used to tell them, I used to say, hey, you can be loud or ignorant, never be both at the same time. And then that'll stop them and they'll be thinking, is he calling me? Yeah, I am. So pick and choose and let's move forward.
But you said that was me, man. I'm glad you're telling on yourself now. Uncle Junior, welcome to the conversation, brother.
And Deacon Junior.
Ain't it clean?
Looking
What's
dapper
going
as
on,
ever.
gentlemen?
What's happening?
Not much, man. Not much. How y'all doing?
Good.
You got your Easter speech ready?
Yes, sir. I got it. I got the benediction ready.
Stop it. All right, we're going to kind of bring some of these conversations, some of these chat questions and statements to the conversation. Uncle Junior will allow you to catch up as we're getting into this.
I've been watching for about the last 25, 30 minutes or so.
All right, go ahead. You got the floor, sir.
Oh, no, I was just saying. I'm not caught all the way up, but I have been watching. So.
Okay, very well.
But for the last 2 minutes or so, when I was connecting and reconnecting and stuff, I might have missed a little something.
That's all right. Let's start with there you go, Michelle Ray's question statement. She said, "Emotional discomfort comes when a person doesn't accept correction and again lean towards the feeling of the conversation instead of listen to the content." Absolutely. Thank you for saying that, and I agree 100%. Cassandra was making reference to that dirty red statement. Let's jump down to Cassandra's next statement. No one intentionally wants to make a person feel horribly. Therefore, out of affinity for that person, they avoid the difficult conversation. That is definitely a thing. They don't want to make the other person feel horrible, but then by that same token, what are they doing to themselves as well? Like
Exactly.
if
That
you
is the
don't
worst way to be.
right,
You do not want to be that person because it'll bottle up and it'll fester, and then something small will happen, and then that something small can turn into something gigantic.
absolutely. So great point, Cassandra. I'm glad you said that. Pamela says that being direct is great. The excuse that I didn't understand and I thought you meant can't honestly be used when we are direct. Just speak softly. I love it. Great point. Let me say, Cassandra said that Chris, I saw that all the time with my cousin growing up. I think she was talking about fisticuffs. Let's jump down to Michelle Ray's next question. I think we already covered that. Let's go to Queen V's next question. When having a conversation with someone, you can express what you're saying without being rude or condescending. People have feelings too. I agree to a degree. I think when we look at terms like rude and or condescending or whatever, a lot of that can be a matter of subjectivity as well, right? So like if I am very direct, straightforward and to the point, somebody else may take that as being rude. That does not necessarily mean that it's rude. They're just not accustomed to somebody being that direct. They're just not accustomed to somebody listening intently to what they're saying and then bringing what they're saying back to the conversation because they may feel that now that person is being condescending. So I'm agreeing with you, but I'm also saying that there's another side to consider as well. So great point.
Yep.
And I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was saying, yep, I agree.
Oh,
that happens when you start getting the feelings and stuff involved. You know what I mean? Because some of this thing is regional. You know, you look at certain people that's in New York, they may speak a certain way when they talk to people, people from different countries, and they speak differently. I remember when I was in a class a couple of years ago in my master's program, And I had a teacher, and she was very direct, and she said that in her country, it's actually offensive to coddle people when you talk to them. So she speaks very direct, but when she was in class, she found that some of her students didn't take well to it, and it was funny. I'm not going to actually give the dynamics, but when she was talking about the group of dynamics of people and what they looked like who was offended by it compared to the people that was okay with it, so.
Absolutely. Good point.
I think on the same topic, when we talking emotions and feelings and stuff, I think sometimes, especially uncomfortable conversations, sometimes you are passionate about how you feel. So if I'm elevating my voice, I'm not yelling at you. I'm passionately talking because I'm trying to get my point across. You can't take that as, oh, you yelling at me. I'm not yelling at you. I'm talking loudly, and that's just an escalation of voice, but I got to get my point across, and I want you to hear me. And it's not the time for me to talk like this and talk like that, because this is a difficult conversation, and I'm trying to get my point across, and I'm passionate.
And keep in mind that feelings is a two-way street, not just a one-way street by the receiver. So if the receiver is only concerned about their feelings, do we totally disregard the feelings of the other person who is bringing the difficult conversation to the table as well? So that's why I said I agree with what you're saying, but it's also another side that we have to consider as well. And I think a lot of times, especially historically, we've leaned too much on one side and not necessarily considering the other side as well. So great point. Ms. Bernadette Phillips says right and wrong are relative terms. I like the fact that she say that because one of the things I tend to share, especially when I'm talking and I'm teaching, I always start a class off by saying I got good news and bad news. And then, of course, they always pick one or the other. And regardless of which one they say, my next response is that there's no such thing as good or bad news. It's only news. And that's really what it is. The facts are the facts. Good or bad is a matter of how you feel about it. So what we have to do is turn that off and just recognize the facts as it is. So thank you, Bernadette, for saying that. Bernadette Simmons says some people find it hard to apologize when they are wrong. So yeah, I do agree because they're stuck in the concept of wanting to be right. And sometimes what they'll do is prolong the conversation, still searching for straws of rightness. So absolutely, absolutely. I want to say I got everybody. Yeah. So with that being said, let's move on to the next topic, which is the fear of conflict. Many people associate difficult conversations with conflict and will avoid them to maintain the peace. Gentlemen, that being said, the question that I have for you is how does the fear of conflict potentially damage relationships, hinder personal growth, and impact overall well being?
You lose the ability to talk and express how you feel. If you are afraid of conflict, then that means you cannot articulate yourself in a manner that is conducive to building the relationship or actually fixing it. And if you cannot do that, then how can you build a relationship? If you are afraid to talk, how can you build? We as men can no longer be afraid to talk. It does not make you soft. It does not make you weak. Talk. Say something. It doesn't have to be rude. It doesn't have to be condescending. It can be direct and firm, but talk. Because if you don't, like I said earlier, it will fester. You do not want it to fester because then you turn into me and you do not want to be me.
With this, I'm going to the question: how does it affect, or how does the fear, I ain't got my glass on, potentially damage relationships, hinder personal growth, and impact? I think when we look at what it can do, it can shut one person down from talking to you, but they not stopping talking to other people. So when you see them talking to other people, you get mad, you get your panties in a bunch, And because they're talking to this person, oh, you can talk to this person about everything. And because instead of actually dealing with the conversation with the person, they get in the shell and get recluse so that they don't talk to the person and avoid the person. So now that's not healthy for the relationship because they're talking to somebody else and the other person see you talking to other people. So now in their mind, you're choosing them, the other person over them, and they can start to conjure up other thoughts, and you can even have feelings, conjure up feelings for other people because now you're leaning on that other person to be your sounding board. So you're establishing the relationship you're supposed to have with this person with the other person, and it's leading you away from this relationship while you establish this one because you have a sense of comfort over here.
How does the fear of conflict potentially damage relationships?
Hold on. I'm sorry. I owe you. I was petty to everybody up here. So before you speak, I got something for you in the background while you dress like that. So you can go ahead now.
I like it. I like it. Ladies and gentlemen, he plays so good, don't you agree? Oh man, that was a good one. Man, where was I at? Okay, here's what happens sometimes when people are have that fear of the conflict and the damage to relationships. I think what happens is sometimes people tend to hold in information. They tend to bottle things up. Tend to hold in their feelings. They tend to not express them. Roland says sometimes they express them to other people, but in many cases they don't say anything at all, and they go around and then they wonder why they have ulcers, these different things like that. When when your health is not the best, it can hinder your personal growth. You know, what happens mentally and many times starts taking a physical, it affects you physically as well. People get headaches, people become overweight, people have a hard time losing weight, their body changes, So all of these things can happen just because, people are scared of the conflict because they don't want to have the hard conversation, so um I think all of those things, and I think also when people hold those things in, like someone mentioned earlier, people sometimes tend to explode at some point, you know, hold it in, hold it in, hold it in. And it'd be sometimes something really small that'll set everything into spiral. And next thing you know, they're bringing up old this and old that. And now everything comes out. All of those conversations that you didn't have back in the day, now everything's coming out, and it's like, well, I didn't know you felt like this. Well, I've been feeling like this for the last 6 months, and well, why you didn't say nothing? And it's like now everything is coming to the table, and what can happen is it can be very overwhelming for the other person, so it's because you've held all of this stuff in, and now you're downloading on this other person and they can't handle it, and that can be very damaging to the relationship. And like I said, that can impact your overall well-being, your physical being, your mental health, all of those things. And not to mention the relationship, it can really damage your relationship.
I'm gonna start with the last part and roll well-being because he kind of hit it, and it's just simple. Stress affects your overall well-being. Period. When you're overstressed all the time, and I can go to bet that a person who has a fear of conflict is not only stressed about one conversation or one person or one friend or one family member. You're stressed because everything seems to tick you off. Everything seems to get under your skin because you're never releasing your feelings or the things that you're dealing with, and everything plays here in your mental. And when your mind is bottled up with so much mess, it's hard. And not just the fact of stress mess you up, but it's hard to focus on your own self-care. Is you're always in a rush because your mind is always running at 100 miles an hour. Sometimes there's some people that I can't stand because they always got to say what's going on in their head. But them some of the happiest people I know. They frustrating because you're like, you had to say that, but they always seem happy because they don't hold in nothing. Now there's a tactful way of doing things, don't get me wrong. So I think it affects our overall well-being because you don't have time to think and focus on what you need to get done for you because your mind is always pondering on every situation or everything and every person that ills you, and you playing bad scenarios in your head and you never get clarity. And so that, I think that affects your relationship because you walking around angry about things that may not even be what it is because of your fear to affect, or your fear of conflict causes you never to seek true understanding of what a person said or did and why they did it. You know, uh, I I remember growing up. I guess I had a bug on my back or something, but I was hanging out with my friends and one of them slapped the mess out of my back. And me not being afraid of conflict, I turned around ready to fight. And now I'm trying to fight a friend because clarity wasn't given. Somebody had to, like, 2 days later, I still ain't talked to the person because we just fought. And somebody was like, dude, he was just trying to get some bug that flew on you. And I'm like, dang, almost lost a friend. We out there fighting and ripping our clothes at the age of 15 over a misunderstanding. But that's what's taking place emotionally and mentally when you avoid conflict and never address things. Um, and I think that affects your personal growth, depending on how you view personal growth. I think some people view personal growth today more as a professional or financial thing, but I think that it's a character thing. It's it's a evolving in your knowledge, in your community, and in your relationships. So for me, I think somebody put in the chat earlier, can conflict be healthy? I think that conflict. Yes, sir.
We're not gonna go there. That's later. That'll be putting the wagon before the horse. We'll get there.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I let I let that one ride, but that that's where I was thinking in that pattern when I saw that uh, potentially damage our relationship. So yeah, don't be afraid. Address things.
And I want to make sure I'm clear when I say it. It's not that I don't want to talk about it. I just don't want to talk about it right now because we
Mhm.
still need to unpack the problem overall. So if we jump all the way to the end right now, everything else, no, you're fine. It's not you, Michelle. You didn't know. But if we jump all the way to the end right now, then everything else is going to kind of be like immaterial. So that's the only reason why I wanted not to jump into that just yet. So Roland, I think you got the floor, or Chris, I'm sorry.
Like I said earlier, it just paralyzes you and it keeps you from actually being able to express yourself when you are afraid to talk. And this isn't just male female dynamic. This is family, this is job, this is everything. You'll tolerate things longer than you are supposed to when you are afraid to talk.
I do have something. I used to be afraid of hurting people's feelings because knowing whether it's parents or whomever, if they were wrong, I would instead of addressing things, I would not say something, and that would hinder our relationship because I knew, okay, I know where your head is. I don't want to come around. So I don't want to be around you. I don't want to be, because if I say something and you're gonna take it this way, and it hinders the relationship's growth because now you really don't have a relationship. You got a pseudo relationship where you, hey, what up? How you doing? Yada yada. Yeah, I love you. And you being fake. And one thing I can't stand is being fake. I always got to be me. I mean, it may be good, bad, and different, but I always got to be me. And if I can't be myself around you, and it's my fault because I'm trying to do something, I'm trying to save your feelings, whatever, I gotta address it because I can't walk around like that. Because I'm walking around, to me, I'm walking around fake. I'm walking around in a facade, and I'm lying to that person. And when you're lying to that person, you can't have a healthy relationship while you continue to live in a lie. And I think that's a hindrance in the relationship.
Yeah, I like all of that, and I think I only really want to add one piece to it because I think that's important. I think any fear, right? I want to kind of start there. Anything that has fear, anything that you're fearful of, you kind of look for it. You're hypersensitive in relation to it. You're kind of being observant. So when it comes down to certain things, you're seeing certain things, and in your mind, it's like, well, I want to address this, but if I address this, they're going to say this. So this is where the wargaming sits at, right? The wargaming gets to the point to where you're automatically making the decisions for the other person. They don't get a vote. They don't even get the opportunity to be a part of the conversation that you're having in your head. And because of that, you avoid it altogether. So the fear of conflict gets you to the point to where you don't address things, you don't bring things to the table, you don't discuss those things, and then inherently those things that are never addressed. I think I think of Gaddy, you mentioned it earlier. The things that are never addressed, well, we can't improve upon those things because in my mind, I think they're all good. And the whole time when it finally does come out, you list off about 15 things that been going on, and I had no idea that it was a problem. But now all of a sudden you expect me to make 15 different changes. And so that's a whole lot. And that's kind of like how that exists. So, when you bring too much to the table, it's too much for one person to do. I'm sorry, I think it was Uncle Junior as well. You bring too much to the table, it's too much for one person to do. It becomes overwhelming. It's like, oh my God, where do I start? So that's one of the things. And for me, I honestly believe and can see how that is damaging to the relationship overall. Uncle Junior, you kind of you stretched, you hit it, brother. You talked about the impact of well-being, and I think Lisa Keys mentioned it as well. Because at the end of the day, when you look at it, like it causes like tension, it causes stress, and stress packed it's a dis-ease. So whatever uneasiness that you're feeling, if you can't get it out, it turns into dis-ease, right? And we know what that all means. So thank you guys for saying that. Greatly appreciate all of that together. Where did we leave off with I think it's Lisa Key's point, the fear of conflict damages relationships and affect your physical health. Absolutely. MJ's point, MJ's point, fear of conflict seems to be reinforced by the dysfunction of insecurity. Insecurity and fear destroy relationships faster than Facebook. So Facebook is a relationship killer, by the way. But absolutely, I agree with it though. Insecurity, a lot of times a person's fear is stemmed by insecurity. And so that's definitely one of those reasons why we talked about emotional intelligence earlier, why we got to be self-aware so that we can have a clear understanding of where we're lacking so that we can continue to improve that, improve upon those things. Cassandra said the fear of conflict, it causes a lot of mental anguish. It brings up self-esteem issues because that person may feel that they must belittle themselves around the more dominant person. That's a great point, and I'm glad you said that. And again, I want to look at it from another side as well. I'm not saying that that's wrong because I know that that's a thing, but then there's another side of it as well. Is the person, and it's not necessarily for you to ask. I'm sure you're not talking about your own personal situation, but we have to understand, like, is the person do they just have a dominant personality or they're domineering? I think those are two different things. If they have a dominant personality, that's not such a bad thing as long as they're not domineering to the point that they're using that personality to hold you under their thumb. And sometimes when you look at it, that definitely can be a thing that incites fear as well. So I think whoever is caught up in that situation, it is a requirement for them to have a much needed conversation because those things can exacerbate over time. So good point. congratulations, Chris, rocking the
I was fist pumping.
I see that, man. So congratulations, Crystal Everett, for becoming a part of the membership team, the membership program. Again, we thank you, we value you, and we know that you're going to find a lot of value out of the membership program. For everybody else who is looking to become a part of the membership program, again, look up under your screen on YouTube, hit the join button, and become a part, because we take conversations like this and we break these conversations down and we give you a process to progression. So again, welcome to the team, Miss Crystal. Okay. Moving right along with this fantastic conversation. And again, keep adding value in the chat. So the next point is risk of damaging relationship. There's a fear that having a difficult conversation might damage the relationship irreparably. This fear can be paralyzing, especially when the other person is a close friend, family member, or a valued colleague. So, that being said, gentlemen, the question: how does the fear of damaging relationships or causing conflict affect your willingness to engage in difficult conversations?
I was just gonna say, I think, and we probably was about to say the same thing. When you look at this, we kind of hit it a little bit, right? How does the fear of damaging relationships or causing conflict affect your willingness to engage in difficult conversation? It it kind of paralyzes you when it's time to engage, because and it puts you in a discomforting position, because your mind goes back to or jumps straight to either protecting yourself or protecting someone else's feelings, like Roland talked earlier. And so it keeps you from being willing to jump into these conversations or address things, and it becomes paralyzing. Like, there's people that I have avoided, and they never knew why I avoided talking to them, because I know that I had to address what they've done to me, and I just didn't want to do it. And when I was younger, I thought that me addressing things and causing conflict was a sign of me being immature as a young man. And so I shied away from it because I didn't want to be that guy. Oh, he's always angry, or he always have something to complain about. And that wasn't necessarily the case. Is I just can't move forward in this relationship with you until we address this said thing. And so it it paralyzes you uh physically and mentally sometimes when you get around those people. So you know, jump into it.
Can I add some context before the next person goes? So, with this question, I want you guys to also look at it from the other end. So, the other end, with a person bringing the difficult conversation to the person that is fearful.
How does the fear of damaging relationships or causing conflict affect your willingness to engage in difficult conversations? It does not. If I cannot have a conversation with you about a specific behavior that you are exhibiting that is damaging this relationship, or if you feel as though you cannot come to me with that same energy, then we have no business in communication at all. That either means A, you don't trust me enough to actually sit and listen to you, or B, you are not willing to sit and listen to me based off of what is going on. I am not going to live another day unhappy. My happiness is paramount. And if having a difficult conversation means that, if having a difficult conversation to figure things out means that we part ways, then we part ways. But there is absolutely no way in heaven or hell that I am going to live another day unhappy. We are going to talk. And if you need to talk to me, you can come talk to me. I say this all the time. I do not have an ego. So, and another thing I say all the time is equivalent exchange. I cannot ask you to be open-minded enough to listen to me when I am trying to have a difficult conversation with you, and not be open enough to have a difficult conversation with you when there is something that I am doing that is a detriment, or there's something that I am doing that you need to talk about. I cannot ask you for something that I am not willing to give. So no, it does not in any way, shape, or form hinder me from having any type of conversation. I have to give what I want. That is equivalent exchange. And that is a natural law. You cannot bypass a natural law.
How does the fear of damaging relationships or causing conflict affect your willingness to engage in difficult conversations? I think that sometimes people they may feel the need to stay in a relationship. And here's what I mean by this. If, say for instance, you're in a situation, say for instance, you're a young woman and you have 3 kids, and you and your husband has been together for a certain amount of time, and the relationship is no longer what it used to be. You guys are not in high school no more. Life has happened, kids, bills, all of these things have happened. And now, even though she may feel like she is being mistreated, she may not be willing to have those conversations because those conversations are going to be damaging to the relationship, and they're going to cause conflict, which in return may cause him to want to leave the relationship. So sometimes people may feel stuck in a relationship even though they don't want to be there. And that they may not want to have those difficult conversations because those difficult conversations are going to cause conflict. We take it to the other side. Let's look at a guy who may be married in a situation, have kids, and may choose to stay in a relationship, good, bad, or indifferent, in order so he can be a father to his children. Right? He may not be willing to have some of these difficult conversations because he needs that relationship to last for a little bit longer so he can develop more of a relationship with his child before he roll out. So that's, in my opinion, some of the other side of this question right there.
And I step on it where I think that with age, sometimes maturity comes. So I think you have to realize whom you're dealing with first and foremost, because if you're dealing with an 18, 20-year-old, 23, 28, if you're dealing with a young person who really is not a person that can handle certain things, the conversation will go different. But and I think we've all been there. We weren't always where we are now, so we always didn't handle things the proper way as we may now. But we may have earlier on, before we matured, before we developed who we are, we may have handled things the wrong way. We may have looked at it and said, well, I have some difficult news to tell someone. So instead of actually dealing with it, I'll hold on to it. I won't say it. And then things just happen to come up. And then you got to say, well, I was going to tell you. And instead of being direct, because directness is that comes with maturity. That comes with knowing who you are. And that comes with some bumps and bruises too. And I think that along the way, dealing with those bumps and bruises, it allows you to be empathetic to those who aren't where you are. So you can see, okay, I understand that this person, because if you're in a relationship, you know how they communicate, you know their maturity level, and so you know where they are. So in a sense, you can already see how the conversation to go. So you being a mature person, you should walk into it, especially if you're on the giving end, walk into it knowing that, hey, put them at ease and let them know, okay, we can talk about whatever, like Chris was saying earlier. Hey, I can talk about anything and actually deal with it. Now, what the outcome is, we have to actually talk before we can develop an outcome, instead of actually saying, well, if you do this, this is going to happen. Because that's what a lot of people do. They go off emotion. If you do this, then I'm walking out. You're doing a lot of
Bye.
talking. but people do a lot of talking, but that's not necessarily if it's and then Chris, like you said, buy, but if it's a relationship that you value, buy isn't the you want to actually have a dialogue so that you can put them in a place where they can grow to where you are.
No, that is not the case. If she says, if you do this, I'm leaving, bye. I do not do ultimatums. That is an ultimatum.
Ultimatums come when you aren't mature. And if you value the relationship, if you say F it and you don't value the relationship, then anybody that disagrees with you is bye.
It has
and
nothing to
get
do
hurt.
with valuing the relationship. It has everything to do with not dealing with ultimatums. You are not going to hold anything over my head to keep me in a place. If we cannot talk, bye. If you
A
feel
wife
like you
and
have to
3
hold
kids
this
too?
relationship over you, if you feel like you have to hold a relationship or kids over my head and say, if you do this, I'm leaving, I will walk down to family court with you. You are not going to hold me hostage.
With the
No.
wife and 3 kids, same thing?
Yes. You
That
are
sounds
not
like
going to
fear.
hold me hostage.
But
So it's the
but even
fear of them holding you hostage instead of actually coming to a resolve
If
and
that were the
learning
case, if she
together.
wanted to come to a resolve, the ultimatum would never be listed. She would never
But she
say,
doesn't
I'm
talk
leaving.
like you. See, that's the point. They don't talk like you. They don't resolve like you. So you got to get them to develop like you instead of just buy, get out.
If she says, if you do this, I'm leaving, goodbye.
It's called a hermit.
It
I,
is
I think
what it is. If
I
I am
think when we talk, my bad, go ahead.
I said this earlier, I cannot ask you for something that I cannot give myself. I have already opened up the door to say, talk to me in your language. So I can understand where you are coming from. Coach says this all the time. The love languages is not about being, this is my love language. It is supposed to be about learning the other ones so that way you can get better at the other ones. I have already opened up the door. Talk to me. You have an open window. It is not going to be a back and forth thing. I cannot ask you for something that I am not willing to give. Now, if I have already established that and it is already set in stone, you can talk to me and you still throw an ultimatum at me, bye. It
I
is what
think
it is.
I think that that's a healthy way of thinking until, and I'm just speaking for me, right? Until you are a father, especially when you're a father of a son. Because what I can't allow you to do is to remove me, the father figure, from my son's life because of my pride. And so I can do that, and I can say that when we don't have children. But once we start having children, yeah, okay, bye as far as divorce. But I cannot allow you to, because your emotional instability or your desire to be controlling, to keep me from my kids. And I'm not going to be so prideful that I will not take the L for now, because my kid is going to grow up and be able to come see me when he want to come see me when he gets older. But kids for me. but but for now, as a man, and the world that we live in, it is what it is. Sometimes you have to I have to take that L for the sake of my children, so that
Tuame,
they're not other children running around here fatherless, repeating the same cycles that we're arguing about right now. Because the
this
men,
is not about pride. This is not about ego, because I already told you in the beginning, I do not have an ego. All of you know what I have been through. You cannot have an ego when the divine creator can take your life from you and sit you down whenever he feels like it. That is where my life is. This is not about pride. This is not about ego. This is about the refusal to be manipulated. I refuse to be manipulated. You will not say, you're going to do this or I'm leaving. Bye. No, that is not happening.
I actually see both sides of it, to be honest with you, and and I get it, because when you agree to one ultimatum, there's going to be several that follows afterwards, and it's going to be repetitious over time. So I get exactly what he is saying. But I also get what you guys are saying as well, because when the kids are involved, you don't want to just leave the kids or allow anything to push you away from the kids. But to Chris's point, I don't necessarily have to be with the person to still have and maintain a relationship with my children. I can't allow someone to use something over my head and leverage, and then over the course of time, that becomes the norm. So we got to be careful of the precedents that we set, and that's why I say I get both sides of it. So
Right.
again, all great points, gentlemen. You guys are warming up, but unfortunately, we got to honor these people time, man. It's listen, it's 9:22. I love you guys.
Already approved overtime. Time and a half.
Absolutely. And that's why I
No
love
kidding.
this. That's why I love this platform. That's why we call it the Empowering Perspectives, because everybody's perspective has value, right? We just have to, number one, consider it, consider the other side of the fence, consider what that person is saying and where they're coming from. And I think that's kind of like the best way to say it. So again, all great points. Thank you guys. And thank you guys in the chats, man. We're seeing what you guys are putting in there. And you got, and you guys are adding such value. So thank you for that. Again, this is one of those points in the show where it's bittersweet because this signifies the end. So, with that being said, we are going to dive into our final thoughts. And with that being said, we're going to start with the unk with the funk, the sharp, the fine dressed gentleman in the bottom corner of the screen, Uncle Junior.
I want to start off, navigating difficult conversations. In my experience, having the difficult conversations are not difficult with certain people. When people are receptive and they're open to having conversation and dialogue, those difficult conversations are really not that difficult. I have found in my experience that the difficult conversations lie when there are emotions that start taking over the conversation. It's okay to have emotions, it's okay to be emotional, but sometimes when we're trying to get to a solution, sometimes those emotions can be there, but we can't be led or moved by them. So one of the things is, initially, that if you're going to have a difficult conversation with someone, the mood, the setting, certain things like that, you may have to consider, knowing the person that you're with, the person that you with, if you can talk this way or if you can talk that way with them. You know what I mean? If they need to be coddled a little bit before you have the conversation. So you need to be aware of the person and how they, how both people can, you have to be in the right space, at some times to have the difficult conversation. At other times, I also want to point out there that sometimes you're going to have to make on the spot corrections. Sometimes you're going to have the difficult conversation right then and there, and that is take some skills and some strategies and different techniques to go into doing that as well. But I just want to end with just saying that having the difficult conversations can be challenging. So work at them, learn about them, and I think that's it.
Yeah, definitely bittersweet. I enjoy being live with these brothers because it's always interesting, and you never know you know was going to come out of it. But for final thoughts tonight, I'm gonna keep it simple. Get out of your head. Get out of your head. Is normally not what you think it is. Get out of your head because you've created an image of somebody throughout time because you haven't addressed anything based upon your perception without clarity. And that is dangerous. I think just like I tell people, just like when you have statistics without narrative, it gives you a false concept of what happened, whether it be sports or whether it be database analytics or whatever the case may be. You have to get clarity. You have to get understanding. And you cannot build a narrative of who I am based upon how you perceive what I did or what I said. Because I tell you, it's real simple. The moment I say something that you didn't like and you don't address, From then on, you're going to continue to build a narrative based off of that one comment. And normally that laundry list of things, when you finally explode, are all built off of one major thing. And it'll take us forever to get to the bottom line. So let's address it now. Let's address it early. And let's be clear, and let's get some resolve. And we can move forward, because what we can do together is more important than my personal feelings. That's what I got. Love you.
My final thought is simple. A difficult conversation should be about clarity. It should not be about belittling the other person. It should not be about attacking the other person. It should be about solving an issue. And it should be a difficult conversation. You should go into it objectively. You have to pull yourself out of it and look at it for what it is and not how you feel. Again, you cannot ask something of someone that you are not willing to give yourself. That's my final thought.
I would have to say, be honest at all times within the conversation. That way you don't have to get defensive about anything, and you can talk directly about and to whomever you're talking to, and control your emotions to the point to where you can talk about whatever. You can even get loud, because being loud doesn't mean that you're emotional. It means that you're passionate about what you're talking about, but never lose control. Never get to the point to where you want to resort to violence or anything like that. And walk into it without any fears, because simply because it's difficult doesn't mean you have to walk in fear. Walk into the conversation knowing that at the end of the day, I'm going to be okay, no matter what's being said. And either we're going to work it out, or we will have to separate. We'll have to remove one another. Because when you're looking at relationships, whether it's friend relationships, whether it's spousal or anything like that, if we're trying to preserve the relationship, we have to get through it. If we want to dismantle it and do whatever we got to do on that end, we still have to get all the truths out about it and make sure that everything is said, so that there's no ifs, ands, or buts. Everything is clear. Get everything out on the table. That way you can move forward knowing that I've said all I can say, I've done all I can do, and I'm moving forward, whether with or without you.
There's no need to rehash what these fine gentlemen have said. They've said it all. In an attempt to respect your time, I want to make sure that I say that we appreciate and value all of the insight that you guys add in the chat. This is one of those platforms that we try to get all of your information on the screen so that we can talk about it. So next week, as part 2 of this discussion on navigating difficult conversations, bring all your questions, because these gentlemen they want all the smoke. And so we want to make sure that y'all give it to them. Listen, have a great and wonderful rest of your evening. Have a fantastic weekend. For those of you who are part of the membership program, join us tomorrow morning where me and Onita, we're going to unpack some information about, I can't even remember what we're talking about in the morning. Just join us tomorrow morning at 10:30. We'll see you guys then. Have a great weekend.